You did everything right. You studied hard. You worked late. You made the responsible choices. You followed the rules. You were kind to people. You tried to be good. And you told yourself that if you just kept doing the right things, life would reward you. Success would come. Happiness would arrive. Meaning would reveal itself. But it didn't, did it? Or maybe it did for a while. Maybe you got the job, the relationship, the apartment, the life you thought you wanted. And then one day, you woke up and felt nothing. Just this quiet emptiness, this nagging sense that despite doing everything you were supposed to do, something fundamental is missing. And you can't shake this terrifying thought. What if none of it matters? What if all this effort, all this striving, all this trying to build a meaningful life, what if it's all just smoke? Welcome to Mind in Exile. And today we're going to talk about one of the most disturbing, controversial, and strangely comforting books ever written. It's in the Bible, which might surprise you. It's called Ecclesiastes. And it says something that most religious texts would never dare to say. That life might be meaningless. That your hard work might not pay off. That good people and bad people often end up in the same place. That wisdom doesn't guarantee success. That you can do everything right and still lose. And before you click away thinking this is going to be some depressing rant about nihilism, stay with me. Because Ecclesiastes doesn't end where you think it does. It offers something unexpected. Not the cheap optimism you get from motivational speakers, not the false promises you get from prosperity gospel, but something deeper. Something that might actually help you survive the randomness of life without losing your mind. Let me start by telling you what this book is. Ecclesiastes is part of what's called wisdom literature in the Bible. It sits right after Proverbs, and if you've ever read Proverbs, you know it's basically a collection of life advice that says, if you're wise, if you work hard, if you're righteous, things will go well for you. Be diligent and you'll succeed. Be honest and you'll be trusted. Fear God and you'll be blessed. It's very cause and effect, very logical, very comforting. And then you turn the page to Ecclesiastes, and it's like someone walked into the room and said, yeah, about all that. It doesn't always work. In fact, a lot of the time it doesn't work at all. The book is written by someone the text calls the teacher or the critic. Scholars think it might have been King Solomon later in life, or someone writing in his voice. Either way, this is someone who's seen it all. Someone who had wealth, wisdom, power, pleasure, everything society says you should want. And his conclusion? Meaningless. All of it. Smoke. Vapor. The Hebrew word is hevel. And it appears over and over throughout the book like a refrain that won't let you forget. Now here's where this gets interesting. The book actually has two voices. The main voice is the critic, the teacher, the one asking all the uncomfortable questions. And then there's a second voice, quieter, that bookends the whole thing. This voice introduces the critic at the beginning and offers a final thought at the end. Some scholars think this second voice is an editor, maybe a student, someone who wanted to preserve the critic's radical honesty, but also didn't want people to walk away completely hopeless. And that tension between radical honesty and fragile hope, that's what makes Ecclesiastes so powerful. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't pretend life is fair or that hard work always pays off. But it also doesn't leave you in despair. It offers something else, something you might not expect. But let's start with the disturbing part, because that's what most people remember about Ecclesiastes. The parts that make you uncomfortable, the parts that sound almost blasphemous coming from a religious text. The critic starts by observing something we all know but try not to think about, that life is short, ridiculously short. He talks about how generations come and go. People are born, they live, they die, and then they're forgotten. Not just forgotten by strangers, forgotten by their own grandchildren. You can spend your whole life building something, creating something, trying to leave a legacy, and within a generation or two, nobody remembers your name. Think about your own great-grandparents. Do you know their names? Do you know what they cared about? What they feared? What they dreamed of? Probably not. And if you do, it's vague. A name, maybe a story, but not the fullness of who they were. They lived entire lives, full of joy and suffering and meaning, at least to them. And now they're just gone, forgotten. And you will be too, so will I. So will everyone you know. The critic is saying, look at life from a cosmic perspective, from the perspective of time itself. And what do you see? That human existence is a blink, less than a blink. We're here for a moment and then we're not. And the sun keeps rising and setting, the rivers keep flowing to the sea, the wind keeps blowing in its circuits, and it's all just this endless repetitive cycle that doesn't care about you or me or anyone. Now you might be thinking, okay, but at least while we're here we can live righteously. We can be good people. We can do the right thing. And surely that matters, right? Surely good people have better lives than bad people. And the critic says, no, not always. In fact, often not at all. He observes that the same fate awaits everyone, the righteous and the wicked, the wise and the fool. Everyone dies. And it's not like the good people get some peaceful, meaningful death while the bad people suffer. No, sometimes the righteous die young and the wicked live long, prosperous lives. Sometimes good people suffer and bad people thrive. He literally says, there are righteous people who get what the wicked deserve and wicked people who get what the righteous deserve. And his response to that, this too is meaningless. You can almost feel his frustration, like he's been taught his whole life that the world is just, that God rewards the good and punishes the bad. And then he actually paid attention. He looked at the world as it really is, and he realized it doesn't work that way, at least not in any clear, predictable, satisfying way. And here's the third disturbing observation, the one that really messes with people. Life is random, not just unfair, random. The book of Proverbs tells you that if you're wise and work hard, you'll succeed. But Ecclesiastes says, not necessarily. You can be brilliant and industrious and do everything right and still fail. Because success doesn't just depend on your wisdom or effort. It depends on being in the right place at the right time, on luck, on chance. The critic says, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. Time and chance, not merit, not morality, not hard work. Time and chance. You can be the fastest runner and still lose the race because you tripped. You can be the strongest warrior and still die in battle because an arrow happened to find you. You can be wise and brilliant and learned and still end up poor and forgotten because the opportunities just didn't come. This is the part where most religious texts would step in and say, but God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. Just trust the process. But Ecclesiastes doesn't say that. The critic is painfully honest. He's saying, look, from where I'm standing, life under the sun, which is his phrase for earthly existence from a human perspective, life looks random. It looks meaningless. It looks like smoke. And that word hevel, smoke or vapor, it's the central metaphor of the entire book. Life is like smoke, and if you've ever watched smoke, you know what he means. It's beautiful. It's mysterious. It's constantly shifting and changing. You can see it, but you can't grasp it. The moment you try to hold it, it slips through your fingers. You can't control it. You can't predict where it will go. And eventually it just dissipates. That's life, according to the critic. Beautiful and mysterious and constantly changing and impossible to control and ultimately vanishing. Now, most people hear this and think Ecclesiastes is saying life is meaningless. Like nothing matters, why bother? We're all gonna die anyway. But that's not quite right. The critic isn't saying life has no meaning. He's saying meaning is unclear. It's elusive. It's like trying to see through fog. You know there's something there, you just can't quite make it out. And this is where a philosopher named Albert Camus becomes relevant. Camus wasn't religious. He was an existentialist who grappled with what he called the absurd. The absurd for Camus is the conflict between humans desperately searching for meaning and a universe that offers no clear answers. We want life to make sense. We want our suffering to have purpose. We want justice and fairness and clarity, and the universe just doesn't provide that. And Camus said you have three options when you confront the absurd. You can commit suicide, which is rejecting life because it's meaningless. You can take a leap of faith into religion or ideology, which is pretending you've found definitive meaning even though you can't prove it. Or you can accept the absurd. Accept that life doesn't make clear sense, that meaning is uncertain, and choose to live anyway. Not because you figured it all out, but because you're here and you might as well make the most of it. And in a strange way, that's what Ecclesiastes is getting at. The critic has looked at life honestly. He's seen the randomness, the mortality, the injustice. He's not pretending it's all part of some neat, understandable plan. He's sitting in the discomfort of not knowing, of uncertainty, of hevel, of smoke. But here's where the surprising wisdom comes in. Because after all this brutal honesty, after all this disturbing observation, the critic doesn't end with despair. He ends with something unexpected. He says, okay, life is like smoke. You can't control it, you can't master it, you can't figure it all out. So stop trying. And instead of trying to make life mean something, instead of trying to force success or clarity or fairness, just be present. Just enjoy the simple things, the things that are right in front of you right now. He says, go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love all the days of this meaningless life. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. He's saying, since you can't control outcomes, since you can't guarantee success, since life is short and random and unclear, focus on what you can control. Your attitude, your presence, your ability to find joy in the moment. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't pretending everything is fine. This is radical acceptance. It's saying, yes, life is hard and confusing and often unfair, and you can either spend your whole life bitter about that, trying to force meaning, trying to make sense of chaos, or you can accept it, accept the smoke, and find beauty in the smoke. Because smoke, for all its elusive qualities, is still beautiful. You can still appreciate it, even if you can't hold it. You can still be present with it, even if it's changing. You can still find meaning in the moment, even if the bigger picture is unclear. And the critic is saying, maybe that's enough. Maybe the purpose of life isn't to figure it all out. Maybe it's just to be here, fully, presently, with gratitude for the small things, a good meal, a conversation with someone you love, a moment of laughter, a walk in nature. These things don't solve the big existential questions, but they make life worth living anyway. Now here's where the second voice comes in, the editor or the author, whoever added the bookend to this whole thing. After all the critic's radical honesty, this voice offers a final thought. And it's interesting because it doesn't contradict the critic. It doesn't say, actually, life does make sense, and here's the formula. Instead, it says the purpose of hearing all this, the purpose of sitting with the discomfort and the uncertainty, is to cultivate humility. Humility to admit you don't have all the answers. Humility to accept that life is bigger and more mysterious than your ability to understand it. And in that humility, to trust. Not blind trust, not naive trust, but trust that even though you can't see the whole picture, even though meaning is unclear, there might still be meaning. There might still be justice. There might still be a point to all this. The final words of Ecclesiastes are, fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. In other words, live as if your actions matter. Live as if there's accountability. Live as if meaning exists, even if you can't prove it, even if you can't see it clearly, even if life looks like smoke. This is faith, but not the kind of faith that denies reality. It's faith that sits in tension with reality. It's faith that says, I see how random and unfair life is. I see how short and unclear it all seems, and I'm choosing to live as if it still matters anyway. Camus would probably call this absurd heroism. Living fully in a world that doesn't promise you meaning, choosing to create your own meaning in the face of meaninglessness, finding joy in the present even though the future is uncertain. And honestly, isn't that where most of us are? We work jobs we're not sure matter. We build relationships that might fall apart. We make plans knowing life could change everything tomorrow. We try to be good people even though we see bad people succeeding. And we keep going. Not because we've figured it all out, not because we have guarantees, but because we're here and we might as well try. Ecclesiastes doesn't offer you certainty. It doesn't promise that your hard work will pay off, or that justice will be obvious, or that meaning will be clear. What it offers is permission. Permission to admit that life is confusing. Permission to stop pretending you have it all figured out. Permission to sit in the smoke and appreciate it for what it is, instead of what you wish it were. And maybe that's more honest than most of what we're told. Maybe that's more helpful than the false promises, and the toxic positivity and the shallow certainty that crumbles the moment life gets hard. This is Mind in Exile, and maybe we're all in exile from certainty, from clear answers, from guaranteed outcomes. But maybe exile isn't punishment. Maybe it's liberation. Liberation from the pressure to have it all figured out. Liberation to be present. Liberation to find meaning in the small things even when the big things don't make sense. So the next time you're lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if any of this matters, if your efforts mean anything, if life has a point, remember the critic. Remember someone thousands of years ago sat with the same questions, looked at life honestly, saw the smoke, and said, yeah, it's unclear, it's confusing, it's short, it's random, and it's still worth living. Not because you've solved the mystery, but because you're here, and the sun is rising, and there's bread to eat and wine to drink, and people to love, and moments to be present for. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Even if you can't see through the smoke, even if meaning is unclear, even if it all feels like vapor sometimes, you're still here, and that's not nothing, that's everything.